Hello and warm greetings. Welcome to the Analyst by Vajiram and Ravi, where we would try to comprehensively analyze 7 articles in 2 different sections. In the analysis part, we'll first have a discussion with respect to the status of Indian agriculture, the associated challenges, and the importance of smart agriculture in addressing those challenges. Then, in the second article, we'll have a discussion with respect to the elderly population in the country and the need of having a comprehensive policy for them. Then, in the simplified section, we'll have a look at 5 different articles from a special perspective of UPSC Prelims 2025 along with the value addition. So stay tuned. Coming to the very first article of the day, this is Plug to Precision Smart Agriculture. See, there's no doubt that India has made a lot of progress when we talk about the agriculture domain. That is in specific reference to providing food security to millions of people. And that was made possible specifically after the Green Revolution. But now what we see is that Indian agriculture is at crossroads. And there are a lot of challenges, be it the food security challenges, be it with respect to the sustainability challenges in the light of the climate change. And here we have a particular column in the Indian Express where the writer is emphasizing upon the need to integrate the digital technologies into the overall agriculture domain so as to make it more productive, make it more sustainable. So what we'll do is we'll definitely look at the digital angle, definitely, but we'll also try to comprehensively look at the agriculture sector, the different challenges, and how we can use these digital technologies to make it more productive. Now, this is a part of GS3, Indian agriculture. Now, let's first talk about the Indian agriculture. See, what is the importance of Indian agriculture? Indian agriculture plays a very pivotal role, very important role when we talk about ensuring the food security of millions of people. Then it supports the rural livelihoods. Then it plays a very important role into the overall economy, right? Now, if you look at the contribution in terms of the numbers. So we have the share in the GDP of the agriculture to be around 18.3%. Now this is based on the economic survey of 2022. Then if you talk about the employment, so we have a data from the Ministry of Farmers Welfare and Agriculture, which says that the employment, the contribution of agriculture into the overall employment is around 45%. Next we have exports. Now, we have a data from the Agriculture and Processed Food Products Export Development Authority, APIDA, a report of 2022, which says that the agriculture exports contributed to almost $50 billion to the overall economy, right? Now, if you can also just have a glimpse at this particular infographic. So it says that the gross value added by agriculture and allied sectors in financial year 24 was almost 277 billion US dollars. Then we have the agriculture exports. Just look at this. In financial year 2024, the agriculture exports contributed to almost 48.9 US billion dollars. Then look at this, key agriculture products which are exported. We have rice, then we have got marine products, then we have spices, buffalo meat, sugar, right? So therefore, definitely agriculture plays a very important role into the overall economy setup. Now, if you look at the food security aspect, the food grain production in the year 2022-23, now this is based on the data given by the Ministry of Agriculture. It was almost 330 million tons. Now this has increased substantially when we look at the numbers prior to the Green Revolution, right? Now in the terms of the global ranking for different products, it is ranked first in terms of the milk production, pulses and jute. Then we have, it ranks second in terms of the rice, wheat, fruits and vegetables. Then it ranks third when we talk about the fisheries production. Now this gives a very hunky-dory picture. But yes, what you need to remember is, what you need to understand is that there are a lot of challenges in the agriculture sector. Let's talk about the food security aspect. Now here I just told you that India is producing a lot of agriculture products. But if you look at the nutritional security, so we have a data from the National Family Health Survey, NFHS 5 survey. It says that almost 70% of the Indian population, it is deficient in the nutritional aspect, right? Then let's talk about the sustainability aspect. So we have been using excess of chemical inputs, be it the fertilizers, be it the pesticides. Then if you talk about the extraction of groundwater, it is highly excessive in some parts of the country, especially when we talk about the western parts of the country, be it Punjab or Haryana, right? Now, these are some of the challenges. Now, if you were to analyze these challenges in an elaborate manner, we have the first is land fragmentation. See, please understand that we have land which is a fixed resource, right? But you have population which is rapidly increasing. So what it would lead to is the fragmentation of land because of the inheritance. Now, understand, we have the data provided by the agriculture census, which says that in the year 1970-71, the average size of the land holding in India was almost 2.28 hectares. And now it has reduced to, in the year 2019-20, it has reduced to 1.08 hectares, right? So obviously, when you will have smaller farms, you'll not be in a capacity to use the resources effectively, right? So if you want to have mechanization, if you want some automation to be done in the field, that would not be possible because that would make it unviable, right? So smaller the land holdings, lesser is the chances for the mechanization. So it makes the mechanization unviable. Next is declining soil health. What we have seen specifically after the Green Revolution is that there has been an excessive use of chemical inputs, be it fertilizers, be it the pesticides, and that has degraded soil to the very possible extent, right? And therefore, we have a data which is given by the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, which says that almost 30% of India's land has been degraded, right? Again, if you have degraded land, what it would lead to? It would reduce the productivity, the overall productivity of the land. Next is water scarcity. What we are dependent on is the excessive extraction of the groundwater, right? So ultimately, it leads to the depletion of the aquifers, right? So therefore, it is a very serious situation. And again, it needs to be emphasized that there is also the issue of inefficient irrigation. So we have the data provided by the Economic Survey, which says that almost 89% of the total water usage in the country is for the agriculture. Then we have a recent report by the Central Groundwater Board, which says that in 256 districts around the country, the water level is at, the groundwater level is at critically low position, right? Next issue is that of the climate change. See, we have been witnessing the ill effects of climate change, be it the extreme weather events, be it the erratic rainfall, be it the increase in the intensity and frequency of extreme weather events, be it the droughts. So that has a tremendous effect on the agriculture, right? So we have data which is also given by the Economic Survey. It says that annually, there is a loss of around $10 billion to the Indian agriculture because of the climate variability, right? Next is a data provided by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, which says that by 2050, we have the crop yields, which would reduce by almost 6 to 7% because of this variation in the climate change. Next is low mechanization level. Again, in the first point we just talked about that because of the land holdings, smaller land holdings, we cannot use the mechanization effectively, right? And that is the issue, that in India, we have very low mechanization. So it stands to be almost 40%, right? And this data is given by the Indian Council for Agriculture Research. Now, the same number is to the tune of 90% for developing countries. So over there, the mechanization is almost 100%, be it the European countries, be it the US. But in India, it's only 40%. Again, if we are not using these mechanized applications or instruments, that would lead to low productivity in the overall agriculture. Next is inadequate market access. What we see is that the farmers are not being able to get the fair price because there is the involvement of these middlemen, right? And again, it leads to low price realization. According to a data given by the National Sample Survey Organization of 2019, it says that only 24% of the total farmers in the country are able to access the formal markets. Imagine that almost 76% of the farmers are unable to access the formal markets and therefore they will not get the fair price. Next is post-harvest losses. What we are trying to emphasize is that the infrastructure, the agri infrastructure is not yet fully developed. There are issues with respect to the supply chains from the farm to the plate, right? Now, there is a loss of almost 1 lakh crores annually. Now, this data is provided by the Ministry of Food Processing because of this inadequate infrastructure, right? See, again, understand that we have perishable. Most of the agriculture commodities are perishable in nature, right? They have a very small shelf life period. But again, if we don't have these infrastructure facilities, be in terms of the cold storage, definitely it would lead to the loss. And that amounts to almost 1 lakh crore. Next is that we have very few cold storages in the country, almost 8,000, which is a very small number. Inadequate agriculture research. See, again, the amount of money which we are investing in the research and development, let's say for producing climate resilient seeds, let's say for producing high yielding varieties, that is too small. So we have countries like Europe, in different countries in Europe or US, which are investing almost 1% of their agri GDP. But this number in India stands to be only 0.3%. Next, we have limited technology adoption. We are not using technology effectively. And again, because of the high cost of the technology involved, because many farmers in the country, majority of the farmers they have very low incomes, right? So there is low penetration of advanced technologies, be it artificial intelligence or Internet of Things, right? We have a data which is given by the Internet and Mobile Association of India, which says, and this is a very recent data, which says that only 30% of the rural farmers, they have access to these smartphones. Now, if they'll not have access to these smartphones, obviously they won't be able to use the digital technologies. So these are the challenges. Here, what is important is that we give a way forward. Now, what has to be the way forward? Again, I'm emphasizing that right now we are trying to look at the agriculture into a very comprehensive manner. The article which is featured in the Indian Express, it only focuses upon the digital aspects. But let's discuss it further. So we have promote crop diversification. See, we have to move away from this rice wheat system. Why majority of the farmers are still reliant on this rice and wheat is because they get the MSP, right? They get the minimum support price. Now, almost 80% of the MSP available in India, that is for rice and wheat, right? So we have to shift to high value and climate resilient crops, be it millets, be it horticulture, be it pulses, be it oil seeds, right? We have to provide crop specific incentives. The government needs to make sure that we have specific incentives for a specific crop, right? We can provide good MSP, a good amount of MSP for these millets. Next is awareness campaign. Awareness campaign with respect to the economic and nutritional benefit of these crops. Next is cold chain infrastructure, very important. Now, if we just have to reduce the post-harvest losses, we have to invest in the cold chain infrastructure. Next is enhancing the irrigation efficiency, very important. What we're trying to say is that we have to get rid of this high water usage. So what we can do is we can go for the micro irrigation, that is drip irrigation or sprinkler irrigation, right? That would enhance the water use efficiency, right? Expand the coverage of schemes like Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sinchai Yojana. We have to expand the coverage. Next is water user associations, very important. So we have different water user associations. They should focus upon effective water resource management, be it the groundwater or be it the over the surface water. Next is strengthen the agriculture research and development, very important. So if we want to focus upon making new climate resilient varieties of seeds, or if we want to make new seeds which are more high yielding, we should focus upon enhancing the overall extension services, the overall R&D, right? Research and development. So at least we have to raise this amount to 1% of the agri GDP. We have to focus upon the startup ecosystems which are actually focused upon the agriculture. Then biotechnology is also very important. So we have to come in global collaborations with different enterprises around the world so that we can focus upon biotechnology. Next is improved market access and supply chain infrastructure. Again, we have to focus upon making the overall infrastructure, overall supply chain very robust, right? We have to make sure that the post-harvest management is done in a very effective manner. So we do not have these wastes. Strengthen the National Agriculture Market, right? So that more farmers can come on board on the e-NAM platform and then they can get a fair price. Next is rural storage and transportation. We have to focus upon that. Next is farmer produce organizations. This is important. Why we have to make sure that we have a very robust farmer produce organizations is so that the farmers can get a fair price, so that it can increase their overall bargaining power, right? Next is address the land fragmentation. How we can do that? We should go for consolidation. Let's say we can have numerous farmers coming on board together, and then they can basically farm, sow crops together, and then we can use different machines, right? So it would enhance the overall productivity of the field. Next is address the land fragmentation issue. What we are trying to say is that we should focus upon the consolidation of these small land holdings. Let's say we have numerous small farmers, right? They can effectively, what they can do is they can come together, they can combine the land, and then they can sow the seeds. Then they can use different machines, right? They can use the equipments, and then that would lead to enhancement into the overall productivity, and that would be beneficial for all the farmers. So we should go for consolidation. The government can come up with land leasing policies, and we should also focus upon the custom hiring centers, specifically for those farmers who have small land holdings. Next is expand the digital and smart agriculture. That is what the basis of the article is. We should leverage different technologies, be it artificial intelligence, the Internet of Things, the blockchain. We should make sure that different AI platforms, if we are employing the AI platforms into the agriculture, the language has to be based on the local language. It has to be vernacular based artificial intelligence, right? Again, we have to make sure that different Krishi Vigyan Kendras, they give the skill to the farmers with respect to the usage of these technologies. So these are some of the way forward. Now, specifically talking about this smart agriculture. Now, how to define what is smart agriculture? So if you just were to give the definition, it is the usage, leveraging the advanced technologies like Internet of Things, Now, let's say if you're using the Internet of Things in the agriculture, what it would lead to is better resource utilization. Next is artificial intelligence. If you're using artificial intelligence, it would lead to proper predictive analytics, right? Next is big data. On the basis of the data, you can have decision making, right? And that decision can be effectively used. Next is precision farming. So precision farming can be used for the chemical inputs, for the fertilizer usage, right? To enhance the overall productivity, optimize the resource utilization, be it the water, be it the chemical inputs, right? And address the challenges of climate change. So smart agriculture is the next move, right? What are the benefits of smart agriculture? The very first is it would lead to higher yield, right? Because optimum usage of fertilizers and other inputs would be there. Next is less crop damage and crop loss. So let's say if you're using AI, and if the AI gives you this direction that there is a possibility of an extreme weather events, so the farmers would be able to have some safeguards, right? Next is greater application of speed, right? Comfort, ease of work, reduce working hours because you're using automation, be it the robotics. Next is lower production costs, enhance road safety. Next is less inputs. So inputs in the same. We have the chemical inputs, the fertilizers, higher use efficiency, right? Also for the water, more environmental protection. So these are some of the benefits. You can note them down. Now, what the editorial says is that we should use different technologies. The very first is use of artificial intelligence in agriculture. It can be used for weather forecasting. It can be used for pest detection, can be used for enhancing the crop yield, right? Again, what the author is trying to say is we have to go for those platforms. We have to go for those AI platforms which are vernacular based in the local languages. And again, we have to think about the affordable AI solutions. We have to make those products which even the small farmers can afford, right? AI-based advisory services, be it the kind of inputs you have to use, be it the kind of, let's say if there is a possibility of an extreme weather event. So AI can be used in that regard. Next is regenerative farming practices. So we have this concept of zero budget natural farming, which is a chemical free farming method, which was developed by Subhash Palika in 1990s. Now that can be used and make sure that we are not dependent on these chemical fertilizers, because ultimately they degrade the soil. So we can have private sector, right? They can basically come and join the research and development in this aspect. Next is robotics and automation, very important. So we need to make those products which are tailored for these smaller farmers, right? So that they are also low cost and can be applied in that small land holding. We can go for public-private partnerships. That is, it's not just the government which has to do this. We can have a collaboration between the private entities and the government. Next is alternative proteins. Now again, there is this new concept. It's a very nascent concept of lab-grown proteins, right? It is in nascent stages, very formative stages. So we have to make sure that there is adequate public awareness, and we also start investing in this aspect. Next is digital twin technology. See, what do we mean by digital technology? Digital twin technology. So let's say we have got trains which are moving. Now, if I have digital replica of these trains, I can basically, make models. I can control the particular movement of the trains. So that is what the digital replica of any activity is a digital twin. Now, if we have the same thing in the agriculture, so you must know that we have crop cutting experiments for the insurance, to avail the insurance. Now, those insurance can be done. Most of these activities which are done, the crop fields, the trials, they are manual in nature. Now, if you want to use these digital technology, we can use a digital twin and make sure that we have these field trials which are done in a digital manner, and that would definitely enhance the overall productivity and reduce the time. Next is blockchain for agriculture. We all know that blockchain has been used to enhance the transparency into the overall supply chain, right? So that can be used into the overall system. Next is climate smart farming. So what we are trying to emphasize is that we have to focus adequately upon enhancing the micro irrigation technologies, be it the drip irrigation, be it the sprinkler irrigation, right? So that we can enhance the water use efficiency. Next is climate resilience seed varieties. Now what we are trying to say is that as the climate is changing, we should invest a lot in the research and development of these climate resilient varieties so that they can cope up with the changes in the climate, right? So again, what we're trying to say is that yes, definitely India has witnessed a lot of progress in the agriculture, but right now this is the time that we basically make some changes. There are loopholes into the overall system and make the overall agriculture system more robust. What we have to do is we have to invest a lot in the digital integration, and this is why we have this concept of smart agriculture, right? So that we can realize this vision of Viksit Bharat by 2047, because in 2027, when we will achieve this dream of Viksit Bharat, we'll have agriculture, which would play a very important role into the overall economic setup. So this is what you need to know with respect to this article. Let's have a mains practice question. The question says, Indian agriculture is at crossroads, grappling with challenges of sustainability, productivity, and climate change. In this context, discuss the role of smart agriculture in transforming the sector, highlight the potential benefits and steps needed to make it inclusive for small and marginal farmers. 15 marks, 250 words. Do write a particular answer on this question. And yes, if you are liking the initiative, if you are really happy with the enriched content, do let us know through your likes and comments. Let's go to other article. Coming to the second article, this is with respect to the elderly care. See, we all know that India is undergoing a demographic transition. That is, the fertility rates are coming down, and as a result, the proportion of the elderly population into the overall population is increasing. Now, elderly population is a vulnerable section of the society, and it suffers from a lot of issues. Therefore, there's a need of having a comprehensive policy, and in this regard, we have a particular petition which has been submitted into the Supreme Court, which is seeking to create a dedicated ministry for the senior citizens. Now, this topic is really important when we talk about GS2, social sector, that is the welfare schemes for the vulnerable sections. Now, as I told in the beginning, that India is witnessing the exponential growth in the number and proportion of the elderly in the country. Now, why this is so? This is primarily because of two reasons. The first is that there has been a reduction in the total fertility rates. The fertility rates have come down. Second reason is that there is an enhancement into the life expectancy. The life expectancy of the people is increasing. And therefore, as a result, we have both the number and the proportion of the elderly which is increasing. Also, we have a data which is provided by the United Nations Population Fund Agency, which says that as of now, the elderly population in the country, it comprises of almost 10%. Now, this would increase to almost 19.5% of the overall population by the year 2050. In this very article, which we are talking about, we have a data which talks about a report. It says that India Aging Report 2023, which was titled as Caring for Our Elders, Institutional Responses. It says that there were almost 14.9 crores persons aged 60 years and above in 2022, 10.5% of the country's population, right? So they comprise almost 10.5% of the country's population. The petitioner has argued that there has to be a different ministry because he says that senior citizens were vulnerable class and came under the constitutional prism of Article 21, which talks about right to dignified life, right? Now, if you just look at this infographic, what you'll see is it is trying to compare the elderly population in the country with that of the population of different countries. It is saying that 30 years from now, the elderly population in India is expected to triple from 104 million, which was according to the 2011 census, to 300 million by 2050. Now, the elderly population in India is fast reaching the current size of the population of Mexico or Russia. So, according to 2020 numbers, we have 134 million, the elderly population in India. That is almost reached equivalent to that of the population of Russia or Mexico. Then, the 2050 population of elderly will be close to the population of the United States, 326 million in 2018. India's 12 million population of 80 plus is equal to the total population of countries such as Belgium, Greece or Cuba. Just imagine that the dire need of having comprehensive policies for the elderly population because of the sheer numbers. Now, if you just look at this particular infographic, what you will see is it is trying to compare the growth rate of the overall population to that of the elderly population, right? So if you just look at this time period of 1991 till 2001. It says that the decadal growth rate of the elderly population in the country was 25.2 and the same number for the overall population was 21.5. Now just look that how this diversion has increased. For the time period which is projected from 2021 till 2031, it says that the decadal growth rate of the elderly population would be 40.5 and that of the overall population would be 8.4, right? So there is a need of having comprehensive policy. Now, what are the challenges being faced by the elderly population in the country? The very first is social challenges. See, please understand that Indian society has undergone many changes, be it through the Western education, through the globalization. Again, I'm not saying that all of these changes have had negative implications, but yes, some of these changes have had a huge impact on the overall family structures. For example, let's say that now the families have transitioned to a more nuclear structure from that of the joint structure, right? Again, that leads to the social neglect of these elderly population, right? Abuse of elderly population is also being witnessed. And this, we are not just talking in terms of the emotional or mental exploitation. We are also talking about the sexual exploitation. We are also talking about the financial exploitation, right? Next aspect is that of the feminization of aging. See, again, understand, the average life expectancy of women in the country is that of more than that of men. And again, if you combine this fact with the kind of social structure we have in the society, so there are already social biases which are against the women. Now, if you combine these two things, what you would see is that there is feminization of aging, and then that leads to a condition which is very sad for old age women in the country. Next is economic and financial challenges. When we talk about the economic and financial challenges, what we need to understand is that there is lack of income, and the financial status of the elderly population, of the majority of the elderly population, is poor in the country. We haven't focused much upon the pension system, the social security schemes, so that they can provide a cushion to these elderly population. Low funding by the government. Now, if you compare the amount of money which the government is spending upon the pension for these elderly population, it is quite low when you compare with that of the developed countries, be it in Europe or be it the United States. Next is lack of housing and other basic amenities. What we see is that most of these elderly population, they are dependent on their children or their relatives. They don't have their own houses. And even if they have houses, they have no access to basic amenities, be it toilet, be it water drinking facilities, right? Next issue is health issues and challenges. There has been a rise in the age-related chronic illnesses, be it the non-communicable diseases, be it the heart-related diseases, right? There's also been an increase in the cataract, right? So these issues, they obviously compromise the overall well-being of the elderly population. Therefore, what we need to understand is that there is increasing need for geriatric care, which is at present in India abysmal, which is quite low. Now, what have been the government initiatives for the elderly care? The very first is National Policy for Older Persons 2011. Now, this primarily emphasizes upon three aspects. The first aspect is it tries to make sure that the young population invests substantially so that they have adequate resources once they reach the age of senior citizens. Second is it tries to make sure that we have different non-governmental organizations, NGOs. They should also come forward and contribute into the overall well-being of the older people. Third aspect, what it tries to do is it tries to make sure that the government comes up with new policies and missions for the overall well-being of the older people. Next is Indira Gandhi National Old Age Pension Scheme for 60 plus age of people from the below poverty line, right? Tries to provide the social security benefits in the form of pension. Next is Rashtriya Vayashri Yojana. Now, this primarily focuses upon providing the assisted living devices so as to make these older people comfortable, be it the specs, be it the assisted walking devices, right? Next is Pradhan Mantri Vaya Bandhana Yojana. Now, this is a social security scheme which tries to provide the pension to the older people. Next is Senior Care Aging Growth Engine and Sage Portal. See, please understand that we have a lot of startups which are actually working upon into this aspect of making products and goods and services for these older people, right? So we have this particular scheme which tries to handhold these startups, right? So that they can come up with more affordable products, and then that can be used by different senior citizens. Now, that is where we have this concept of silver economy. So do read about it. Next is what should be the way forward. The very first is formalization of caregiving economy. So see, we have a data by the Niti Aayog. It says that if we shift to home-based care for many of these things, for which we go to the hospitals, then that can actually lead to a reduction in almost 65% of the hospital visits and into the overall reduction of almost 20% of the total expenses. So what it says is that if we substitute the hospital care with that of the home-based care, that can reduce the overall visits by 65% and the overall expenses by 20%. Next is comprehensive policy on home-based care. See, again, when we are trying to talk about the home-based care, the care economy, what we need to understand is that at present it is more unorganized. We need to focus upon the training programs, the skill development. We need to focus upon the nomenclature of different positions in the caregiving economy. We need to have different programs in place so that this caregiving economy can be more formalized, can be more organized. Next is Awareness of Maintenance and Welfare of Parents and Senior Citizens Act of 2007. According to our data, only 12% of the elderly population in the country are aware about this particular act. So we need to make them aware with respect to the kind of rights they have, right? Next is strengthening the pension system, very important aspect. One of the most important questions for these elderly population is the pensions. So the government should come up with new products. They should subsidize, they should invest in this particular aspect so that these people, once they reach to that particular age, they have this cushion of pensions. Next is replication of Switzerland Time Bank Initiative. So we have this particular initiative in Switzerland where what is being done is, so we have the young population which is contributing into the overall care of these senior citizens or the persons who are ill. Now the amount of time they're investing in that particular care, that can be used by them once they get ill or once they reach that age of senior citizens, right? So again, that kind of concepts can also be used in India. So what we're trying to say is that definitely we have this segment of the population which is vulnerable, and we should not treat them as a liability. They have a lot of experience. We should use their experience so as to make sure that we have adequate policies and we have a more sustainable development paradigm, right? And we need to invest. We need to come with more of these schemes so as to make sure that they have a healthy aging, right? So this is what you need to understand with respect to this article. Let's have a mains practice question. The question says, India's aging population is rapidly growing, creating new challenges for the social welfare systems. Discuss the need for elderly care in India, the challenges associated with it, and the measures that should be taken to ensure their well-being. 15 marks, 250 words. Do write a particular answer on this question. Coming to the simplified section, we have the first topic which talks about the electric vehicle status in the country. So see, this is a part of the data point in the Hindu. Now, there is not much of concept which is involved in this article, but this article gives you a lot of facts, quite interesting facts. So the gist of the article is that we have a particular report, Think Mobility by Google and Boston Consultancy Group. It says that the perception regarding the electric vehicles in the country is quite positive. And more number of people are willing to buy the electric vehicles. Next, what it says is that for a developing country like India, which has low per capita income as compared to the developed countries, India has quite good potential for integrating the electric vehicles into the overall mobility. Next, one of the very interesting facts is that which the author is trying to say is that we have more number of women who are inclined to purchase the electric vehicles, right? So we'll go through that. Also, we'll look into one of the very important schemes which has have a very high probability of coming into the prelims, that is PM E-Drive, and we'll also look at the Amrit portal. Now, let's read the article. So 1 in 3 consumers in India is eyeing electric vehicles for their next purchase, says the report. Women are emerging as key decision makers in the electric vehicle market. Well, this is obviously true for other things as well. 1 in 3 consumers in India is eyeing the electric vehicles for their next purchase, says the report. Then women are emerging as key decision makers in electric vehicle market. I believe that it applies in almost all cases. While electric vehicle related challenges persist, innovations and localized manufacturing could pave the way for greater adoption. The report highlights significant growth potential in India, right? Because see, again, we have people who are having greater disposable incomes, right? The incomes are rising and therefore they're more inclined for having a sustainable way of living and therefore they would go for the electric vehicles. Chart 1 shows this, that the vehicular market has the highest potential for growth in the developing countries such as India. On the contrary, we have countries such as the US, Switzerland, Denmark, which already have a high vehicle penetration rate, have limited room for the growth. So just look at this, that we have countries like India. So they have huge potential. So developing countries have the highest vehicle penetration growth potential. India, $2.4 thousand GDP per capita, 3.3 penetration, just 3.3. So it has a huge potential for integrating the electric vehicles. And for these countries, we have the adoption rate, which is quite low. Next is 36% of the consumers are considering electric vehicle for their next four-wheeler, while 30% are inclined towards an electric two-wheeler. Chart 1 and 2 shows not only there is significant growth in the potential of India's automotive market, as only a small share of the population owns car. Now this data is very important. Just remember that only 3.3% of the total population in the country owns cars. But substantial portion of this growth is likely to be driven by consumers who are increasingly inclined towards electric vehicles. A 2.7-fold increase in elite households by 2035. The affordability of higher price EVs is unlikely to deter substantial share of households. So what we are trying to say is, even if the cost of the electric vehicles rises, we'll have more and more number of people going for this option. However, we have different barriers. Over half express concerns about the availability of charging infrastructure. That is one of the very serious issues. 45% are dissatisfied with the high acquisition costs of the electric vehicles. 1 in 3 worry about the battery life, and 1 in 5 feel the current variety of models is insufficient. Just look at this graph. So we have those who consider electric vehicle for their next purchase. We have 36%. For their two-wheelers, it's only 30%. Then we have people who are concerned with different issues. For example, we have almost 51% who are concerned with the charging infrastructure, 45% concerned with the high acquisition cost of the electric vehicles, 31% concerned with the battery life, and 20% concerned with the model variety. Now, to address these challenges, the report suggests several solutions, improving the availability and the discoverability of the charging infrastructure, offering innovative financing options. So these are some of the measures which can be adopted. Women influence 52% of the electric vehicle purchase decisions, while they influence only 38% of the non-EV purchase. So what it shows is that women are more sustainable when compared to men, right? The Gen Z is 2.7 times more likely to use self-drive rentals compared to the older generations. 1 in 4 consumers who are buying a car for the first time are planning to purchase a pre-owned vehicle. Not very important information. So just understand that we have more and more number of people who are willing to spend money for the electric vehicles in the country. Now, we have this particular data point. I have put it for you. So if you have any question which talks about the electric mobility in the country, you can effectively use this data. It is sourced from the India Brand Equity Foundation, IBEF, right? So just you can use this data. The data gives you a picture of the electric vehicle market in the country. So it says that the electric vehicle market in India, it is expected to go to almost $114 billion by 2029. And see, the number of sale of electric vehicles has increased, almost crossed 1,500,000 number of electric vehicles, right? So electric vehicles sold by category. So we have almost the two-wheelers who dominate 57%. Then we have the three-wheelers, 38%. Then we have the passenger vehicles at 5%. Now, the public electric vehicle charging infrastructure, so it is highest in the state of Maharashtra. Then we have Delhi. Then we have got Karnataka, Kerala, right? EV registered over the years, see the number. It is just rising at a skyrocketed pace. Then number of electric vehicles sold by in different categories. So just have a track of these data can be really important. Now, this is very important. See, we had a particular scheme, FAME 1 and FAME 2, faster adoption and manufacturing of hybrid and electric vehicles. Now, we have a particular scheme which has replaced these FAME schemes, and it is PM eDrive. Primarily, it is focusing upon providing subsidies for the integration of the electric vehicles into the overall mobility and providing the charging infrastructure. So, the EV subsidy scheme offering the upfront incentives for the purchase and supporting the installation of critical EV charging infrastructure. It has replaced the previous flagship scheme, such as the faster adoption and manufacturing of hybrid and electric vehicle, which expired in March, and a 3-month the electric mobility promotion scheme, which ended in September 30th, 2024. Convenience Energy Services Limited will provide the upfront incentives, facilitating the establishment of essential charging infrastructure in the country, in the 9 cities, for example, Delhi, Mumbai, supporting the intercity and interstate e-buses in consultation with the states. One can get the e-vouchers which need to be signed by the buyer. Now again, if you're purchasing a particular electric vehicle, if you want the subsidies, you can go through this particular mode, submit it to the dealer and upload it on the PM eDrive portal. Very important scheme. It can be probably asked in the prelims, right? So just understand that it applies to the electric two-wheelers, three-wheelers, e-ambulances, e-trucks. Then there is a facilitation of the e-vouchers we just talked about. Then allocation of almost 500 crore for the deployment of e-ambulances, provision of almost 4,400 crores for the procurement of the e-buses by state transport units, right? So just remember. Next is the e-Amrit portal. Now this portal was launched at the COP26 summit in Glasgow. Now it is developed by Niti Aayog, do remember, provides the information on EV adoption, purchase and investment opportunities and different subsidies which are available for the electric vehicles. Additionally, it complements the United Kingdom's government initiative to raise the awareness and sensitize the consumers on the EV benefits. So just have a look at this. This can be probably important for the prelims, the PM eDrive scheme and the portal, Amrit portal. That is it for this article. Coming to the next article, this is with respect to the ongoing controversy for the appointment of the vice chancellors of the state university. So just before a few days, we had a discussion with respect to the office of the governor, right? Over there, I also talked about this issue. So the gist of the article is that we have the UGC, which has come with the draft regulations, which it has said that it is based on a specific provision in the UGC Act. So it is a kind of a delegated legislation. Now, also we have in some states the parallel legislation which talks about the appointment of the vice chancellor in a specific manner. Now, what the author is trying to say is that there is a contradiction between the rules which are actually specified, the regulations specified by the UGC, and the state laws. Which one should prevail? See, we have Article 254, which actually says that if there is inconsistency between a parliamentary law and a state law over a subject which is mentioned in the concurrent list, then it is the parliamentary law which prevails. So again, looking this particular aspect from that angle, what the author is trying to say is that we have these regulations which are delegated legislations. They are not law actually, right? So they should not be basically proceeding over the state laws, right? If the parliament makes such a law, then it's fine. But these are the regulations made by the executive, and therefore they cannot stand in front of the state laws. That is what the author is talking about. It has a lot of, this article has a lot of cases, very simplified version. We can, it's the author has tried to write in a very elaborate manner, so we'll just go through that. 6 of the Tamil Nadu's universities are without a vice chancellor, primarily because of the impasse, which is because of the differences between the UGC and the state laws, disagreement between the governor and the state government regarding the composition of the search committee of selecting the VC. The governor also acts as the chancellor of the state universities, insists on including a nominee of the UGC. So the governor says that there has to be a nominee from the UGC, but what the state says is, on adhering to the respective State Universities Act, which generally require the search committee to consist of one nominee each from the Chancellor, the Syndicate, and the Senate, that is the Executive Council of the college. It opposes the UGC involvement due to the concerns over erosion of the state autonomy in the university governance. Also, it relates to the aspect of the federalism, right? Conflicting Supreme Court rulings have complicated the same thing. One set of judgments says that it is the governor's stance which has to be taken a priority over that of the state laws. The other side says that no, it is a state laws which basically takes a precedence over the governor rule. The controversy has been exacerbated by the recent UGC's draft regulation of 2025, seen to erode the state autonomy. Similar standoff in Kerala and Punjab have been noticed. Now, this has led to serious deterioration in the university administration, including delays in the staff appointment. So, UGC regulations are subordinate legislations. Please understand, these regulations are subordinate legislations framed under Section 26 of the UGC Act 1956. The crux of the dispute is whether the UGC regulations framed by the UGC's chairman, vice chairman, and 10 other members can supersede the provisions of the State University Act. This is the main crux, right? Which are plenary laws passed by the state legislature, right? So which should hold the prominence, whether the state laws or the regulations which are made by the members of the UGC, right? This is a large part of the larger question of law dealing with the center-state relations. Can the delegated legislations framed by the union government and its agencies under a central law override the provisions of a state law, right? It underlines a critical constitutional issue regarding the scope of delegated legislation with potential of eroding the separation of powers and the principle of federalism. Now, we have Article 254 of the Constitution, which addresses the conflict between the central and the state laws. So we can just have a reading which talks about the inconsistency between the laws made by the parliament and laws made by the legislature of the state for a subject mentioned in the concurrent list. If it states that if a state law is repugnant to a central law on matters of the concurrent list, the central law will prevail and the conflicting part of the state law will be void. We understand that if you have a law, the central law, which, it's talking about a concurrent subject and the same, the subject is being talked by a state law. But if there's a conflict, we'll have the central law which would prevail. But is it also true for the delegated legislations? Is it also true for the regulations which are made on the basis of a central law? That's the question. It applies only to the laws enacted by the parliament and state legislatures and not to delegated legislations. So we have a specific case, the Tika Ramji versus State of Uttar Pradesh, where the Supreme Court very clearly says that the power of repeal, if any, was vested in the Parliament, and Parliament alone could exercise it by enacting an appropriate provision in regard thereto. Parliament could not delegate this power of repeal to any executive authority, such as delegation, if made, would be void. Now, also we have other case, Indian Express versus Union of India, 1984, which says subordinate legislation may be questioned on any of the grounds on which plenary legislation is questioned. It also says that it may also be questioned on the ground that it does not conform to the statute under which it is made. It may further be questioned on the ground that it is contrary to some other statute. Again, it's quite elaborate, but just understand what the author is trying to say is that if there's a law which is made by the central government, by the parliament, obviously it would prevail. But we cannot say the same for the delegated legislation, right? These rulings make it clear that the central government and its agencies cannot use subordinate legislation to override plenary state laws. Any changes require a plenary central law passed by the parliament. And overreach by the UGC. So there is no repugnancy between the provisions of the UGC Act 1956 and Tamil Nadu University Act. See, what the UGC Act says is that we are talking about the teaching staff appointment. But again, we need to understand that VC is not a teaching staff. He is basically the officer of the university. So ideally, there is no repugnancy, right? Moreover, the UGC's power under the section 12 subclause D of the Act are only recommendatory. Very important. Now, the Supreme Court has actually, affirmed this in a very important case, the University of Delhi versus Raj Singh, where it said that the ruling that the UGC regulations are advisory and not mandatory. Thus, UGC's regulation 7.3 on the vice chancellors is a classic case of executive overreach in the delegated legislation and is ultra vires of UGC Act 1956. Then there are also some inconsistencies where the Supreme Court has taken the side of the central government. So some conflicting Supreme Court judgments have also come. So in the Annamalai University versus the Secretary Information and Tourism, the Supreme Court held that without articulating any reasons, that once UGC regulations are laid before both the House of the Parliament, they become a part of the UGC Act, invoking Article 254 subclause 1 and rendering any VC appointment contrary to these regulations void. So again, what we need to understand is that the stand of Supreme Court has not been clear. In some situation, it has supported the state laws. In some situation, it has supported the delegated legislation made by the central government. The interpretation that the UGC regulations lose their subordinate character and automatically become part of the Parent Act merely by laying down before the Parliament is not supported by the Constitution. It contravenes a significant precedent ruled in the Chief Inspector of Mines versus Karam Chand Thapar, right, where it said that the rules retain their character as subordinate legislation and do not become integral to the Parent Act. Again, what the Supreme Court said, that it is the law which is important and not the delegated legislation. We cannot treat the delegated legislation as something which takes a precedence over the state laws. Given the constitutional significance of the dispute and the doctrinal ambiguities, a definitive ruling by the constitutional bench is required. Such a ruling would hopefully reaffirm that Article 254 subclause 1 of the Constitution applies only to conflicts between the plenary, central and state laws, clarify that delegated legislation does not automatically become the part of the Parent Act unless laid under the affirmative resolution procedure, and emphasize that the advisory nature of the UGC regulations for the state universities unless adopted by the state. Such clarity is essential not only to restore the normal functioning of the state universities, but also to preserve the delicate balance of legislative powers between the center and the state. Again, to ensure that the principles of the federalism are kept in mind while making such appointments, and there should not be any arbitrary infringement into the rightful exercise of power by the states. That is what the article talks about. That is what you need to know about this. The next article is with respect to the need of having distinguished jurists as judges in the High Court and the Supreme Court. See, the gist of the article is that there has been an increasing pendency of cases. But again, what we find is that the total sanctioned strength of the judges in the country, that is not being filled on time. So again, it is leading to increase in the backlog of cases. So as we say that justice delayed is justice denied. So in this particular article, the author tries to talk about particular article 124 and 217. Now, we had this, appointment. We had a clause in the Constitution which talked about the appointment of a person, of a distinguished jurist as the judge of a high court. But that has been repealed. But still, we have this distinguished jurist for the Supreme Court. But till now, no one has been appointed through that. So the author is trying to emphasize upon that aspect, that there has to be the appointment of these distinguished jurists so that we can basically take on this backlog of cases aspect, right? So let's go through this. Effective and timely delivery of justice can only be achieved if the backlogs and the vacancies it is addressed urgently. As of January, very important data can be used in your answers. As of January 1st, 2025, 371 posts of the 1,122 posts sanctioned across the high courts, they remain vacant. Allahabad High Court functions at only 50% of its capacity, total sanctioned strength. So it has a direct impact on the already alarming levels of backlog. Millions of people have to wait for a long time for justice with their faith in the judicial system, which actually erodes with time. There are now about 60 lakh cases pending across all high courts in the country. We need to have both immediate as well as reformative measures. Now, while the pace of the collegium recommendations and the resulting appointment has increased over the years, it has unfortunately not been able to match with the number of retirements and the ever-increasing number of filings. Now, this has put enormous strain over the overall judicial system, and this likely to have an adverse impact on both the time given as well as the depth of the engagement with a particular case. See, again, if you have a number of cases and if the judges are forced to resolve the cases at a faster pace, obviously they won't deliberate, they won't give importance to that particular case, the facts of the case, and it would lead to a sort of miscarriage of justice, right? Therefore, well-staffed judiciary functioning at a near total strength is a need of the hour. A game changer, so we have Article 124 subclause 3 subclause C and the repeal article, which is 217 subclause 2 subclause C. See, this article talks about the appointment of a distinguished jurist as a judge of the Supreme Court, and this article, it talked about earlier, before being repealed, the appointment of a distinguished jurist as a judge of the High Court, right? So you can just have a look at these articles. So we have 124 subclause 3 subclause C, which talks about distinguished jurists, but now we have 217 subclause 2 subclause C, which has been repealed, which allow for the appointment of individuals who, in the opinion of the President, effectively the collegium, are distinguished jurists as judges of the Supreme Court and the High Court. Unfortunately, we have Article 124 subclause 3 subclause C, which has remained unutilized, and Article 217 subclause 2 subclause C, which has been repealed. No jurist has been found to be distinguished enough to be appointed to these posts till date. Appointments to the High Courts and the Supreme Court in India have always been either from the bar, that is the advocates, or the judicial services. Now, the issue of vacancies and backlog is stifling the system. Introducing and invoking the provisions to appoint the distinguished jurists can be a way forward, right? Involving the world of academia directly into the mainstream Indian judicial system can bring both immense benefits and challenges. Now, the good part about this article is that the author has tried to talk about the benefits of including the academicians into becoming the judges as distinguished jurists, and also the challenges, right? A vast pool of specialized knowledge, research-based critical thinking can provide unique insights, and therefore it can add to the missing dimension of the judiciary understanding of the complex socio-economic and socio-legal cases, right? The issues are the lack of courtroom experience, procedural knowledge, right, with respect to these academicians, right? Understanding of the limits to exercising the judicial power, and a certain degree of resistance among the status quoists. These are the challenges. An important message: the number of countries that allow jurists or professors of law to be appointed as a judge, which is equivalent to that of the Supreme Court or the High Court in the country, have vastly benefited from this practice. So this is an empirical evidence. The reintroducing of Article 217 subclause 2 subclause C and appointing jurists or academics as judges of the High Court would send an important message. Adequate training and procedural know-how can be given, skill training can be given, would ensure that the judicial discourse is enriched and that judicial decision-making is further enhanced. Next aspect is granting an opportunity to distinguished academics to effectively engage with the complex problems of the contemporary legal world would give a fresh perspective. Again, it is trying to emphasize upon the good aspects of including these academics into the judicial domain. Serve as a bridge between academia and practice. The need of the hour is to tide over the current crisis of increasing backlog and act as a bridge. Now, what have been the recommendations given by this particular author? First, the government must comply with the collegium's recommendations with a strict time frame. Then what it should do is innovating solutions such as reintroducing Article 217 subclause 2 subclause C, which talks about the appointment of distinguished jurists as judges of the High Court, will help fill the existing vacancies. Next is tapping into the academic world would be of help and ensure that the Indian judicial system remains dynamic, robust, diverse, grounded in practical realities, as well as in-depth understanding of the underlying constitutional principles. So this is what the article is talking about. It is a kind of way forward which you can use in the questions related to the appointment of judges or the backlog of cases while you're writing a mains answer, right? So that is it, what you need to know with respect to this particular article. Now coming to the next article, this is with respect to the India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor. Now, the gist of the article is that what the authors are saying, that we have a new administration taking over in the US, headed by President Trump. Now, they are actually giving recommendations to both India and the US and saying that they should come in close partnerships and make sure that they fructify the visions and objective of the IMEC corridor, which was proposed earlier, right? Now, we'll talk about what IMEC is all about. Again, see, if the authors are talking about that, maybe in future, the President Trump or the Indian government may emphasize more upon this aspect. So it can be crucial for your exam, right? So if you just look at the India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor, it is basically a sort of an economic and transport corridor which links India to that of the European countries. So if you just look, we have the Mumbai port. Now through sea route, it is being connected to the UAE, then through a road link and railway link, it is being connected to the Haifa port in Israel, and then further to Piraeus port in Greece, right? So this is now, it would go further in the European countries. Now this would make sure that we have a very robust economic corridor between India and that of the European countries, traversing through the UAE and Saudi Arabia and these countries. Now, the India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor is a significant geopolitical and economic initiative unveiled during the G20 summit in September 23. It aims to enhance the connectivity and trade between Asia, Middle East, and Europe by developing a modern multimodal transport corridor. Remember, it's a multimodal, involves the road links, the rail links, and the sea route. Key features: to facilitate the seamless transportation of the goods, energy, and data between India, Middle East, Europe, and fostering economic growth and regional connectivity. Now, what are the different components? So we have the Eastern Corridor. Now, this connects India to the Middle East, and then we have got the Northern Corridor, links Middle East to the Europe. So from here, from Mumbai to that of the Middle East, we have the Eastern Corridor, and then further, we have the Northern Corridor. Multimodal transportation include railways, ports, highways, digital infrastructure, pipelines. Green energy focus. Now, this is very important aspect. The project is trying to focus upon the green energies, be it the green hydrogen, right? Hydrogen pipelines and renewable energy sources to promote sustainable development. Different participating countries, we have India, United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Israel, and European Union nations. Supported by the global powers like the United States, strategic significance, it would be a sort of a countering to the China's BRIs, through which it has invested billions of dollars in different countries, be it Myanmar or Pakistan. And through that, it has made these countries trapped. That is what we call as debt trap diplomacy, right? And again, it is using these countries for its own strategic advantage. Now, through this particular initiative, through the IMEC, we are trying to make sure that more and more number of countries, they are less dependent upon the Chinese BRI, and then they are more sort of dependent upon this sustainable initiative of IMEC, right? Act as a counterweight to China's Belt and Road Initiative, offering a more transparent and sustainable alternative. Geopolitical stability. Strengthen India's role in the global supply chains and enhances its strategic position. Economic integration, it boosts trade, reduce logistic costs, accelerate economic development. Then energy security, facilitate the transport of the energy, be it the green hydrogen, be it the renewable sources, right? Now, what the article says is that we have new administration in the US. Now, it is trying to emphasize that specifically after the signing of the ceasefire between the Hamas and Israel, this is a very good opportunity to invest in the IMEC, right? So as to make sure that the whole region is prosperous and we can basically utilize it for strengthening our position in the region, right? The US-India relationship has evolved, especially from the times of the Clinton since 1990s, and it has focused upon multiple issues, be it the economic growth, regional security, democratic values. One of the very important component is the IMEC agreement. It presents a tremendous opportunity for President Trump to solidify this multilateral partnership while advancing both strategic interests of US and India. By leading the effort, the US can help create robust economic corridor to ensure free and open trade routes with enhanced energy security and technological innovation. Now, this was announced in 23. IMEC represents an ambitious vision to forge an integrated network of spanning three vital regions, right? So you have India, you have Middle East, you have Europe, right? The corridor must develop efficient transportation routes, including railways, shipping networks, and maritime connections, while also establishing cross-border electricity and hydrogen supplies. The end goals should be to enhance trade connectivity, reduce the transportation cost, while diversifying the global supply chains and promoting deeper integration. This is what the article talks about. At the moment, it is reasonable to suggest that IMEC is more conceptual than concrete. Again, primarily because of the events which happened between the Israel and Palestine, right? So it disturbed the stability aspects in the Middle East, and ultimately the project could not be fructified. But now there's a possibility. By supporting IMEC, the US-India can establish a compelling alternative to China's Belt and Road Initiative, creating a more balanced global economic architecture that aligns with the Western democratic values and market principles. The corridor demands substantial infrastructure investments that directly compete with the other national priorities. Private sector engagement introduces another level of complexity. Now, these are the issues which are sort of more deep with respect to what kind of issues the project is facing. But again, what the authors are trying to say is that there has to be proper investments in different aspects, be it the infrastructure, be it the renewable energy, and even the private sector should come on board. Without regular strategic engagement, there is a significant risk of creating uneven economic landscape that could breed tension and political friction among the participating countries. IMEC promises substantial economic advantage for India by dramatically reducing the trade costs and forming the maritime logistics, right? So you must know that India is greatly dependent upon the maritime trade, right? So therefore, this project becomes very important. Strategic network reduces the vulnerability to potential disruptions such as those that might occur in Suez Canal. Very sensitive region, right? By positioning itself as an alternative to BRI, the corridor allows India to strengthen diplomatic ties with West Asia as well as Europe. India has emerged as a significant player in the green hydrogen development. Again, focuses upon the renewable technology, launches ambitious initiatives to develop green hydrogen. So because it is focusing upon the energy transition and decarbonization efforts. India is collaborating with international partners. We have Germany, Japan, where we are collaborating on specifically on the green hydrogen aspects, the technological innovations in this domain, right? In the aspects of the production, storage, transportation. Now, this would help reduce the carbon emissions, decrease dependence on fossil fuel imports, and create new job opportunities. The Trump administration role in facilitating the Abraham Accords, very important. Now, you need to tell me the first question I'm asking. You need to tell me the name of the countries who have participated in the Abraham Accords. Let me see who answers first in the comment section. Instrumental in creating the diplomatic conditions that made IMEC possible. Again, what we are trying to say is that it was Trump administration which went for Abraham Accords, and now it has come back. So therefore, it is but natural to say that IMEC should be prioritized, right? Now, there is a peace agreement between Israel and Hamas. Both leaders could facilitate the much needed meeting of the IMEC participants to discuss the next steps, right? So this is what you need to know. Understand what we are trying to say is we are emphasizing upon the importance of IMEC for making sure that there is a robust trade and connectivity route, and then we can also gain the economic potential of this particular project. That is it what you need to know with respect to this article. Now, coming to the last article of the day, this is with respect to the maintenance and care of the Mulla Periyar Dam. See, the gist of the article is that we have disputes between Kerala and Tamil Nadu with respect to this particular dam. Now, the Supreme Court has asked the state governments of Kerala and Tamil Nadu that whether the supervision or with respect to the care and maintenance of Mulla Periyar Dam, it should be taken by a committee which was formed by it, or whether it should be a committee which is formed under the Dam Safety Act, right? So this Dam Safety Act becomes really important. Maybe a question can be asked in the prelims or even the mains, and that's the reason I have tried to cover it. So the Supreme Court on Monday orally asked the states of Tamil Nadu and Kerala that whether the supervisory committee formed by the court would be more effective in taking care of the 129-year-old Mulla Periyar Dam, or it should be given to a statutory committee under the provisions of the Dam Safety Act of 2021. The Section 5 of 2021 Act mandates the constitution of National Committee on Dam Safety. We'll talk about this particular act. The committee would be chaired by the Central Water Commission chairperson and have representation from the center and states and include 3 specialists in the field of dam safety and allied fields. The committee's crucial functions under Section 6 include evolving policy, guidelines and standards to prevent disasters related to the dam failures and maintaining safety standards. Do give importance to it. So let's talk about the Dam Safety Act. So the very objective of this particular act is to provide for the surveillance, inspection, operation and maintenance of these dams, so as to ensure their safe functioning and mitigate the disasters caused by dam failures. Just look at this particular case. We have the Mulla Periyar Dam, which is almost 130 years old. So God forbid, if there is any particular failure which takes place in this dam, it can lead to the loss of life of many people. So in order to avert such situation, we have the constitution of these committees which look into the safety aspect, right? Applies to all dams in India that are 15 meters or more in height or between 10 to 15 meters with certain design, right? Covers 5,200 large dams in the country and even smaller ones in the country. Key features. So we have the National Committee on Dam Safety, composed of experts in dam safety, functions, formulates dam safety policies, provides technical guidance, reviews dam safety. Next is National Dam Safety Authority, ensures the compliance with the safety norms, resolves disputes between the states on dam safety, lays down uniform dam safety protocols. Then you have got state dam safety organizations established by the state governments, conducts dam inspections, implements safety measures, monitors the functioning of these dams. Then we have got other owner agencies and entities or organizations owning dams. We can have state departments or corporations, right, responsible for ensuring the safety and maintenance of these dams. Then what are the provisions for inspection and monitoring? So we have the periodic inspections. Dams are subject to regular inspections based on their age and other parameters. Then we have emergency action plan, mandatory for all dams to minimize the disaster risks. Safety protocols, detailed dam safety manuals, surveillance systems and maintenance protocol have to be maintained, right? What are the penal provisions? So again, if there's a non-compliance of these standards, so the individuals who are responsible or the organizations, they would be imposed penalties, right? Significance, so it talks about the public safety, so it prevents dam failures, which can lead to catastrophic loss of life. Environment protection mitigates the risk to ecosystem. Disaster risk reduction obviously provides a proper framework on which this issue can be handled. Accountability ensures that there is a clear role and responsibility among different stakeholders. Again, what you need to understand is that there are a lot of issues with respect to these safety organizations because there is a lack of collaboration among different states. And again, we have also the issue of the technical capacity, the research capacity with respect to these organizations. But let's see what the future would be. So that is it for today. I hope you really enjoyed the session. Do let us know through your likes and comments. All the best. Thank you.